They lied to us from the very beginning.
If they tell you that, grab your child and run.
Yeah. I remember the very first time I called, I was very put off by them. My gut said this was not a good place.
I remember you saying that the lady you spoke to was not the most pleasant person.
No, I should have stuck with my gut instincts on that first phone call.
We feel like we have to share our story and the events that led up to and where we are currently at.
We were just so new at everything. We had just gotten our diagnosis. We had never had an IEP, an ETR, or anything like that before. We had made lots of mistakes, and our hope is that if we share this story with you guys, that it'll help you guys learn from our mistakes, hopefully make the process easier for you guys.
Make your lives easier.
Yeah.
So you don't have to make the same mistakes.
So I very distinctly remember calling this school for the first time. The lady I spoke with was rude, and the only thing she cared about was the tuition and money, and making sure we knew we would have to pay out of pocket and the amount.
So after the initial phone call, we had been rejected by 15 other schools.
We have a whole video on that. If you want to see, if you want to hear the reasons behind that and that whole thing, we will link it up here. You guys can check that out. We're not going to try to repeat ourselves in this video. We just want to help share the information that we now realize were red flags.
After all the rejections, we circled back to them.
Because after she was rude to me, I didn't apply to the school. We're just not going to apply there. And I had moved on to other schools. But at this point, we then had to circle back to the school. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe if we just could get through this one, it's just me, one person. If we get through her and move on to the rest of the process, we can see what the school is really like and how everybody else is, because we didn't want to judge a whole school by one person on one phone call. And it was on that phone call that she had lied to me about having an Orton Gillingham certified teacher on staff.
Yeah.
So we went ahead, sent in our application.
They called us for an interview. So out of the 20 schools that we applied for, only 2 actually wanted to meet with us and interview Jessie.
So when we were actually up there doing the interview, we talked to the principal about the dyslexia and Jessie's past history with bullying and what their, tolerance was for that.
Principal made it very clear, have 0 tolerance for bullying, which we liked. The dyslexia was something that they would be able to help them with, along with everything else, the social skills and everything.
And right after we met with him was when Jessie went straight to the reading teacher that we talked about, the Orton Gillingham.
Yeah.
And she was the one that gave him his reading test. She said that she was the one that was in charge of the entire reading program, and she worked mainly with the elementary kids, but since Jessie was on that level, she would be the one working with him. They did accept us. And they pushed us to get enrolled and get him in one day of class before we can actually get moved up here.
Yeah.
Because our move up date wasn't until November 1st, but they wanted us up there in October. We had to do one day in October. Mm-hmm. And so they based all of their paperwork and everything, all of the ETR, the IEP, everything was based off the report from Nationwide. They hadn't done anything with him. It was all based off of that.
They hadn't sat down and witnessed Jessie in class.
They did the interview and the reading test, and everything else was based off the report that we had sent from Nationwide. Our only assumption was that was based on funding, that they wanted more funding for him. So when I went up to meet with them for the ETR and the IEP, they kind of rushed through the paperwork and just had me sign it. I did not understand anything that I was signing. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, is that the IEP is a contract between you and the school. And it's not just their side of it. It's not just whatever they think, they want, they say they're going to do. You actually have a say-so in the process of what services your child should get and what services they need. I didn't know that. I legitimately had no idea. They went through all of these numbers and everything, and I didn't have a clue as to what they're talking about. They're just like, here, sign it. The thing that I didn't know is that I didn't have to sign the IEP at that point. I didn't know that it could be a discussion. And this was just things that I didn't know as a newbie. These are things I learned later. But it would have been so helpful to know that information in the beginning. In the beginning of school, Jesse started off well. He was liking it. He was getting good grades, but we had no idea what he was doing.
Not a clue.
We weren't getting any feedback from teachers, from the liaison person, because we couldn't speak directly with the teachers. We had a liaison that was supposed to communicate to all of his teachers and then give it back to us, and then we contacted her, and then she would contact the teachers. It wasn't one-on-one with the teachers. It was we spoke to her, and then she spoke to them. There was the middleman.
And when we went in for the initial interview and was talking with the principal, he made it very clear that parents were very involved. They were informed of everything going on. That's what the liaison was for, was so that we didn't have to bug teachers. They talked to the teachers. They we're supposed to check in on the kids, let the parents know how everything's going in school and if, some things are needed or being overlooked.
Even when we did get a couple of parent-teacher conferences, they would say very broad general things of, oh, he's doing great in class. He's a great kid. We love having him. I wish he'd speak up more.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we got no details of what he was learning, what he was working on, how he was actually doing.
School only has 300 students, middle school through high school. So the teachers are fully aware of who Jesse is. It's not like he's getting lost in the crowd.
Yeah.
But to talk to them, you'd think that he was one of like 4,000 students that they had to deal with a day.
Yeah.
So between November and February, 4-month span, Jesse did not make any friends.
No, he had a lot of kids that he wanted to be friends with.
Yeah.
But he wasn't receiving any type of friendship, nothing.
We were told also that socialization was a big part of the school, and they helped, because it is a school for autism, they help kids develop social skills and,
They help them make friends. Help them interact at lunchtime, and that they can be down there with them and help them build these skills. And that
never happened.
No. So because Jesse was new to computers, at this school, they all got personal computers in 5th grade. When Jesse started, November of 6th grade, and he didn't have these beginning typing classes or basic computer classes, and he didn't use a computer very often. So he wasn't equipped with the knowledge of how to really efficiently use the computer. And so we did talk to the school about can he have a typing class, something to help him get familiar with it. And they said that they would. And what they did was, here's a website you can go to, and you can do this on your spare time.
Yeah. They just hand him a computer and expect him to know how to do everything.
He didn't understand how to find his assignments. The beginning of that part was really hard. We couldn't find his assignments. He couldn't find his assignments. We didn't know. And they tell us very specifically, all of his assignments, all of his classwork, all of his homework is listed in one spot.
It's not. His teachers listed it in every different location. Mm-hmm. Some of them would just list it in the classroom. Others would list it on the to-do page.
There was nothing on the calendar.
There was nothing on the calendar.
Half the stuff didn't have due dates.
Yeah.
And he said the teachers would often change it this says due today or due tomorrow, but no, we're going to do that in class.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
It was not clear.
No.
So, the poor kid only had 4 months before the pandemic hit at this school. That's not very much for a new school for him to adjust to. He seemed to be adjusting fine, but we didn't know how he was actually doing. And the distance learning was a real eye-opener for how the school worked and what he was actually learning.
Reading was definitely the biggest eye-opener.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about Ashley. I would sit there and watch him read or do his reading stuff, and I'd be like, what are you doing? Like,
we had a request that he still had that. Like, he was in 6th grade and at a 2nd grade reading level, and we're like, he still needs his reading class. So then they had to arrange for him to have a time with the reading specialist to actually practice his reading during the distance learning, because that wasn't originally even set up.
Like, distance learning, you don't need to learn to read anymore.
Then he got this set up, and we would watch, you know, listen and hear what was going on. And the teacher would tell him the words, like the key words. They would tell him the key words, and then Jesse would read the key words, and then they would read the paragraph. Jesse would read the paragraph, she'd read a paragraph, Jesse'd read, she'd read. And it was basically telling him to memorize words.
Yep.
And there was no sounding it out. There was no syllables. There was no phonics. There was nothing. It was just memorize the words. If you get it wrong, you're ruining your time.
So after going through their little list of memorizing words, when they would read a paragraph every day, not like once a week or something like that to test how he's doing, it was literally every day of his reading class, she would speed test him on like 2 paragraphs and read through them as fast as you can and you can't stop to fix your mistakes. You just go through it, and she would count the number of mistakes he had and
the number of words per minute.
And that's all that it turned out to be about, was just how quickly can you read? Who cares whether you're right or if you're comprehending anything?
Well, they had the reading comprehension part of it where he had to answer questions. But, I mean, I wouldn't call it a very good reading comprehension. It was extremely basic.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't actually comprehending what was going on. It was, do you remember exactly what was done in the story?
Yeah. Also with his classes, they're very chaotic.
We wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt that, you know, we just switched to distance learning, but they all had computers in their class every day. So this wasn't a huge adjustment. This wasn't you were in person and pencil and paper and you switched to computer. They all did this work on the computer. The only difference was the teacher is now on a video instead of right in front of them. Yeah,
majority kids with autism and ADHD, things like that. So keeping them focused, I figured keeping them focused is hard enough in class, in person, but distance learning, distraction with everything else. But then to like top it off, like be sitting there and you'd hear a baby or a dog in the background or whatever, and you ask Jesse like after his class, like, what was that? And he'd be like, oh, my teacher brought our dog, or, you know, their baby and stuff, and like during class. And then it got to the point where they'd spend a good chunk of their class just talking about what everything's going on in the background of someone on the screen and not actually doing classwork.
Or he'd just be sitting there listening to everybody else talk because everybody else is having their own little conversations and there's no like instructions, do work, structure like that. It was just, your stuff's listed there. You just, do your thing.
Yeah, do your thing.
If you have a question, let me know. That summer was when we started looking for a dyslexia tutor. It was blatantly obvious that he wasn't improving very well. The education he was getting for the reading was not what he needed at all with his dyslexia. So we started getting on waitlist in the process of a dyslexia tutor. But again, the pandemic did not exactly make that easy for us. Fall of 2020, we wanted to see how the school year was going to go. Obviously, he didn't get a fair shot at a good chance for the education with the pandemic and him coming into the school year late. So we wanted to give them a fair chance. We had, high hopes, everything they had told us in the beginning. We're like, let's give him some time. Fall went downhill very quickly.
Yeah.
He still didn't make any friends the next year.
No.
They were in person. They started in person in August. They started back to school in person.
Started in person. And he literally had every class with the same
pot of people.
It was like 6 or 7 people, ate lunch with them, but as far as friendships, no.
So I kept bringing up the reading, and then at the end of November, they're like, we're going to add him speech therapist. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? But I have a whole video on that. Again, we'll link it, so we're not repeating ourselves in this video if you want to check that situation out. But they're like, we're going to put him with a speech therapist in a group once a month at lunchtime.
And this was to work on their social skills.
Which again, we're pretty sure was just a thing of, we can get more money if we put him in this group and we want to make more money off the kids.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what that was about, is our assumption. And then before Christmas, we started researching what rights we had to the dyslexia, the dyslexia teacher and everything like that, and figuring out what we had to do to get him the help that he needed, because he wasn't getting services that he needed at this point. And that was abundantly clear. And we learned very quickly that if we wanted to get them to have to legally do anything, we had to change the IEP.
Yeah. We scheduled an appointment to meet with him
In January
to talk about his IEP, his reading, what we wanted to do about that.
Mm-hmm. Getting him dyslexia services.
Yeah.
So it was at that point that we learned they do not allow outside services.
They do not allow outside services.
They are not supposed to have any outside tutoring. He should not have a dyslexia tutor or any type of tutor outside of school. They don't allow that. And they also don't allow outside therapists, ABA therapy, anything like that. All the services should be offered in the school by their people. And you should not be seeking services outside of their school.
Yeah. The reason they gave for not allowing outside tutoring was it would interfere with their teaching process.
Of other classes.
Mm-hmm. Not reading. Like, they're like, oh, our reading system works. They argued more that it interfered with his other subjects.
Yeah, that him learning to read a different way than what they were teaching would interfere with science. I mean, they told us at that point that if we didn't like it, to get out.
Yeah.
That we could go elsewhere. That this is the way they did it. You don't like it, leave.
Yeah.
So we pushed the reading hard. And we told them, like, we already did all of our research on the reading program that you're using, and it does not help with kids with dyslexia.
And all they would say is that we can show you the numbers where it does.
So it was at this point that we asked about the Orton Gillingham certified teacher, and they claimed to have never said that.
Yeah.
They said, we've never said such a thing. We might have had somebody before that, was Orton Gillingham, had a little certificate, but they've probably left by now. But the reading teacher that said she was Orton Gillingham certified was in that meeting.
Yeah. Their whole solution to this was, we'll keep progressing Jesse with the same thing, but once a week or something like that, we're going to pull him away from his second grade reading level and take him back to the basics.
And their logic, because we said, we're like, teachers have gone over phonics with him over and over again, and he's still not getting it. With his dyslexia brain, he's not comprehending it. And they're like, we haven't taught him yet. We haven't taught him our phonics. We need the opportunity to teach him this. So that's when they decided that they were going to pull a teacher off occasionally to go back and teach him the basic phonics.
Yeah. While still continuing to teach him through the memorization and stuff.
Because their argument was he was improving, again, by memorization. It's not that he knew the words.
Weren't doing it every day. It wasn't that he was learning. It was just them getting through the lessons to get them done. I
had examples of words that he could not read from the night before that were basic second grade vocabulary that he couldn't read. And they're like, oh, we haven't noticed that. He's doing great. You might just be seeing something different at home. So after this whole meeting happened in January, Jesse was constantly complaining about his reading teacher and her behavior towards Jesse from that point forwards.
We poked the bear, and the bear got mad.
And it wasn't even anything against her. Here's the
thing.
I like her as a person. I think she's great. And I'm
she's
sure
a nice person.
She does a fine job teaching, but he has dyslexia and his brain doesn't work the way a neurotypical brain does, and he can't learn this subject in that manner. It was absolutely nothing personal or against her.
Apparently we had issues with their reading system, and that turns the school against you.
Yes, they took it very personally, And the reading teacher took it very personally.
Yes.
And Jessie was constantly like, she was really mean today. She was very snappy. She really pushed how quickly he could read. He could not fix mistakes. He's like, she keeps going like this and says faster and saying like, get it done.
Yeah. Ever since the meeting, like, she was pushing him faster to read faster, and like,
Just,
get it.
yeah, memorize the words and get the numbers up as high as she possibly could.
Yeah.
This was the same teacher that was then following him to other classes. She became the liaison because our liaison took a leave of absence and would be gone for the rest of the year. So she's in his other classes now, and she's giving him red marks constantly in math class and other classes as well.
For his note-taking. He's writing down what the teacher is writing on the board, and because it's not exactly how the teacher is writing it, but still the concepts of the notes, I've seen his notes, I mean, they make perfect sense. She was red marking him and telling him he was doing it wrong.
Then it came down to, we went to Texas, got stuck in Texas, and couldn't make it back on time. Jessie missed extra days of school because we couldn't literally get him there. At that point, we got a really not nice email from her.
Yeah.
So she's like, everything has to be done by March 5th. And I'm like, I don't even know what day we're going to be home. Our flight has been canceled 5 times. We don't have water. We don't have access to food. I don't know what day we're going to be back. She's like, everything will be due this day. Here's what he needs to be working on. And I'm like, I have no control over this situation. I can't guarantee he will be back by that point. I mean, God, I hope so, but nobody knows. Yeah. So then it came back to the first day back to school, Monday, after we got back from Texas. And Jessie got in the car, and the first thing he said was, I didn't get lunch today. I was told that I have to do work. I'm like, did you get to eat lunch? And he goes, yeah, my science teacher let me eat lunch in science class. And what had happened was this reading teacher, that his liaison, told him that he had to eat while working and was checking on him, but he interpreted that as he was not allowed to eat lunch and had to strictly do work. And at no point did she make sure he was eating. I had sent an email that night saying, hey, Jessie said that he couldn't have lunch that day. And at that point, the principal got on the email chain and was just like, obviously, our kids are supposed to have lunch. We will make sure that he has lunch tomorrow, but he has makeup work to do, and it's not uncommon for us to say you have to do your makeup work while you eat lunch.
Which we're 100% fine with.
That night, he was very overwhelmed because he thought, like, he broke down crying, had a little meltdown because he thought he had to complete all of this work right now. Like, it had to be done today. I'm like, no, honey. I'm like, we have 2 weeks to complete this work. What can we get done tonight? And then we, broke it all down for him, and he was doing better. But at that point, I didn't even know what all he was missing. Like, I had some assignments listed on his computer, but I was unaware of what all he needed to get done. And I emailed his liaison asking, like, what all does, like, I need a list of what he needs to do. She'd be like, oh, it's on his computer, or, oh, I already sent it to you. I'm like, those are some of the things, but I know that there's current things. And she's like, well, obviously he has to do those and the current things. I'm like, I need a priority list. I need something to show what he needs to do first. And we didn't get it.
Yeah. The default answer is it's on his computer.
Mm-hmm. And he knows what he needs to do.
Autistic child with ADHD.
And executive functioning
issues knows what he needs to do, when he needs to do it, and how.
So then it came down a few days before, March 2nd, 3rd, before this March 5th deadline that she assigned to him as his deadline to get everything caught up. I got an email from his speech teacher saying, hey, he's got to do this, this, this. I'm like, okay, great, we'll get it done. What else does he need to do? And the liaison told us, like, just that. That's it. Okay, great. He's caught up. Yeah. We'll get that done. So Jessie did those assignments that night. That Thursday, March 4th, I talked to her in the parking lot saying, hey, I just sent you an email saying, what all does Jessie need to do? And she told me in the parking lot, she's like, okay, well, he's all caught up. There's nothing else. Great. Good job, Jessie. Fantastic. Yeah. And then she emailed me back that evening with another email confirmation saying, that's it. Friday rolls around, we don't think anything of it. The next Monday, March 8th comes. That night we get an email saying Jesse didn't complete this speech assignment.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry, what happened here? We just talked to the liaison saying everything was done and turned in. The next day at school, Tuesday, Jesse gets in the car and he's almost in tears. And he looks at me and goes, reading teacher called me a liar. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She called you a liar? He goes, yeah. I'm like, she used the word liar. And he goes, no. She said, you're being untruthful with me. You're being untruthful with everyone. And some other things, but I couldn't hear what she was saying because she said them really quietly. And that set off a red flag for me because the night before, she sent me an email saying he's being untruthful. Jesse's never used the word untruthful before. It's not in his vocabulary.
Yes,
Liar, definitely.
yeah, liars in there.
Untruthful, no. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go ahead and do this assignment that is supposedly missing. And Jesse goes, I can't. This teacher said that I will get a 0. I'm like, wait, she's not the speech teacher. She's the reading teacher. No, when I talked to the speech teacher about it, she then talked to my liaison, and my liaison said, no, it's past due. He can only get a 0. He can't do it.
Keep in mind, his speech, he was supposed to get speech homework, whatever, was due that previous Friday. The speech teacher was out that Friday.
March
so
5th.
He couldn't have given it anyways.
So that night, even though he was supposed to get a 0, I'm like, we're still going to complete this assignment if this is something you need to do. Like, I am strong on holding him accountable. We're all for it. And we're like, even if you're getting 0, this is your assignment. You need to do it. So I'm like, where is it? And he's just like, I don't know. He's like, I already did it. And I'm like, what is this assignment? Long story short, after about a 20-minute conversation, there were 2 speech assignments. They had the exact same assignments, just on 2 different subjects. And he did not realize they were 2 different assignments. He's like, no, I did it because I did this step and this step. He got them confused. He legit thought he did it and didn't know that he hadn't because he did not understand that they were 2 different assignments. Again, autism, ADHD, executive functioning. This isn't really a big surprise. This is the point of the liaison. So I obviously emailed the school saying, hey, what is going on? And the principal gets on the email and they're like, why don't we have a meeting to discuss this? I think there's some confusion. I'm like, yes. Let's have a meeting. I think that's exactly what we need. And he's like, how about next week, the end of the week? I'm like, no, I want it now. Like, we need to discuss this right now as to what's going on. And that was Tuesday. And they're like, okay, well, we'll meet on Thursday. So Thursday rolled around and we had a Zoom meeting with the principal and the reading teacher, which is also his liaison.
That was a fun time.
We came with 2 solutions. We had 2 very reasonable solutions in our opinion. I couldn't even finish my sentence saying Jesse said, this teacher called me a liar, and she interrupted me with, that is not true. That is absolutely not what happened.
Yeah, the entire time we're talking about, like, hey, this is what Jesse's saying, like, this is the email. She's on the screen, like, making faces and stuff, like, being all defensive.
And we even set her up, we're like, this was Jesse's interpretation of what happened. Because everybody has their own perspective. Like, everybody has their own viewpoint of what happened. And, like, we were not being accusing or anything like that. We're like, this is what Jesse is telling us. This is his interpretation.
No. It got to the point where 20 minutes in, the principal told the liaison reading teacher just to get off.
Yeah. Without
any more discussions or anything like that. He's just like, all right, you're allowed to leave now.
Basically, what we were told was that Jesse did lie because he didn't complete his assignment. I'm like, we've had this discussion with his therapist. He believed he completed it, so he didn't think he was lying. He did not understand there were 2 different assignments. I understand that he didn't complete the assignment, but it was also the liaison's job to check his work. And her answer was, Jesse told me he completed it all.
Yeah.
That's why she told me and emailed me saying everything was done, because that's what Jesse told her, according to her.
And so the principal comes back and says that he would expect, and it is their policy, to hold the students accountable for everything, and that he would expect any other teacher in that school to confront the kids about being untruthful.
And that
Which-
all of them should do that.
I agree. Like, you should hold kids accountable and talk to them about, hey, you're lying about this. You shouldn't be doing that. But to just walk up to a kid
At the beginning of their class and tell them, you're being untruthful with me. You're being untruthful with everything. And then other words that were inaudible.
yeah, and just leave it at that. No explanation as to why this is wrong. No teaching lessons or anything like that. And that's hard enough for
An adult.
an adult, a neurotypical kid. But then you're doing it to, this is how you treat kids that are diagnosed with autism?
Yeah, like we did not see it as appropriate. This whole thing had escalated to this point, and we were uncomfortable with Jesse learning anything from this teacher because obviously their trust had been broken. They were not they were not getting the communication together. Jesse did not trust her. Jesse didn't feel comfortable with her, and we suggested that he works with somebody else.
Yeah, he gets a different liaison, different reading teacher. Apparently that is
No. They just flat no.
Can't change liaisons, can't change his reading teacher. Keep in mind there's other reading teachers. There's other people who can be liaisons. I mean, clearly.
Because she wasn't even supposed to be ours.
Yeah.
She was only ours because the other one left on medical leave.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I mean, it was a hardcore no.
Yeah. Not even like,
Let's
I'll
discuss
consider
it.
it. Let me
see
talk with
what's
some
available.
people. It was just no.
No.
We're not doing that.
So I told him that we want him to do the distance learning then.
That is not an option either. Despite the fact that there are still kids. His answer was, we're working on bringing the students back. 2 months left in school, and they're like, we're working on bringing all the kids back.
Mm-hmm.
So we respond with, but there are kids that are still distance learning. And he goes, yes, but we are working on bringing them back.
I'm like, okay, well, I want him to be switched to distance learning. He goes, no.
No, we
Absolutely
are not
not.
switching people to distance learning.
It's not an option was the answer he kept telling us. It's not an option. I pointed out, I'm like, if he gets another notice saying he's been exposed to COVID from a student there at school, he will have to do distance learning for the next 2 weeks. He goes, that's different. He's not switching to distance learning. It's not an option. So I'm like, okay, those are our two best suggestions. What do you propose? He goes, I have nothing else for you. You need to find somewhere else to go.
Yeah.
The last 30 minutes was just find somewhere else to go. He needs to go somewhere else. You need to find somewhere different for him. It was get out.
Yeah.
Get out. We don't want him. I'm like, there is only 2 months, 2.5 months of school left. You expect us to take him out of your school and put him in another school for 2.5 months of this academic year. Like, that is not good for kids with autism.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you
Yeah.
need to find somewhere else to go now.
It wasn't, can you talk to some people? Can you talk to superintendent, your supervisor?
I specifically asked
Other
him,
people.
who else can make this decision? And he said, he will tell other people about it, but this is what we're doing.
He wouldn't bring anyone else for further discussion. It was
Nope.
all, I will relay the message.
Yep.
To everyone that needs the message relayed to.
Yep.
And if they choose to reach out to you or have further discussion, then they will reach out to you.
I had to ask 3 times just to get the first name of his boss.
Yeah.
We wanted to hold him there for the last 2.5 months, not to switch schools
Yeah.
in March. But we weighed our options of, do we switch him to another private school? Do we switch him to public school? Do we switch him to homeschooling? Do we switch him to distance learning through public school? And for our family, we felt that it was best to just switch him to homeschooling. So that is what we're doing for the next 2.5 months. And in this time, we have talked with several other people. And this is what concerned me. Like, okay, we had a bad experience. It is what it is. But the number of people that I have spoken to in 2 days.
Yeah.
In 2 days, they have said they have sued the school for not following IEPs. They have been told that they needed to get out because the parents asked questions about what was going on in the school. that the one lady was telling me that, she was paying the full tuition and yet they were getting money for him for services that he was or was not getting. They weren't following IEPs. They were just...
We found out very quickly, in a very short amount of time, that their unwritten policy is you ask questions, you're out the door.
Yeah. Parents are not allowed to be involved and not allowed to ask questions unless you're going to be doing fundraising for them. Yeah. It's the only way you're allowed to participate. You're not allowed to have parents in the classroom observing. You're not allowed to have parents knowing... You're not allowed to have parents talk to the teachers. At no point did we talk. We talked to the teachers during parent-teacher conferences. It was very short. It was very brief. And it was just... The liaison, he's a good student. And everybody else was still in there with it. Yeah. It wasn't just us and the teacher. We couldn't talk to them individually. It wasn't allowed. There were so many red flags 2 days after, like with the number of people coming forward saying this exact same thing happened to me. Yeah. It was so concerning. And they've been sued so many times and yet they keep getting away with it. We don't want other parents to have to go through this same experience. You should not be kicked out of a school for asking a school what it is they're doing in your school. So what we're hoping you guys are going to learn from this experience, obviously you guys aren't all necessarily in Columbus, but when you're going to any school, when you're looking at any school, know that you don't have to sign the IEP, that you have the right to put what you want on the IEP, what your child needs on the IEP as well, not just what they decide. You're allowed outside resources. No school should look at you and go, you can't get your child extra help. Can't have tutoring or therapy. It goes against our teachings and our ways. If they tell you that, it's a red flag. Run. Just run. Run. Grab your child and run. Check to see what their lawsuits are. Those are normally public record. And you want to know what other people have sued them over, because when this happened and we started looking at their record, it was lawsuit after lawsuit with the same kind of stuff. Yeah. We're talking a span of 15 years. This has been going on for more than 15 years. Yeah. Might sound like weird because you're going to school. Schools should have everything and you should trust them. Ask for certificates. Ask to see their paperwork. We should have asked for the Orton Gillingham certificate. We trusted the school on what they said about Orton Gillingham certified to find out a year later that they never had anyone with that. Yeah. Go with your first gut instinct. If there is a red flag right off the bat, even if you're rejected from 20 different schools, don't circle back. Go with your first gut instinct. There's a reason we have our gut instincts and we just have to learn to trust them more. Thank you guys so much for staying through this video with us. I know it was a long one. We felt like it was a really important one. We want you guys to learn from our newbie beginning mistakes and hopefully not make similar ones yourself. If you have any other advice, please feel free to comment below or share it. Share it with our community. Share. We are one big community and we are all here to support one another and help each other grow and learn. Yeah. That is an update on what has been going on with us, where we're at currently. We don't regret moving all the way up here for this school. Obviously, it was a big adjustment for our family, and this is the reason we moved out of state, is to go to this school for Jesse. But we have reached outside resources and we're getting him in the right direction. And it's been a really good learning process for us, and we hope that you guys can learn from it too. Thank you for watching. We'll keep you guys updated. Bye. Bye.
Click on this video. Will you please click on this video? Come on, push it. Can you please subscribe? Can you please push that subscribe button? Or for the other video, you're gonna press this button. Go on. Click this button, or this button, or this button. Well, mostly this button. I would like it if you did.